Hello. Today I want to talk about dialogue. And by the way, my name is Paula, and I write books and I write for television news also. So I like to talk about writing or just about like things related to being an INFP, since I'm also one of those. But today I wanted to talk about dialogue, as I mentioned. Um, it can be really fun to write, but it can also be super tricky. I remember a lot of times getting stuck writing dialogue because I would stop midway and ask myself, does this sound realistic? So it can be really difficult. But then there are other times where I sat down to write dialogue and I get really into it. And that's usually when I'm not worried about editing myself and I just write. So that helps. But okay, moving ahead with some tips on what not to do when writing dialogue. There are seven altogether. So I'll go ahead and start with the first one. The first one is something I've mentioned in another YouTube video that's similar to this one, is it's never a good idea to use dialogue as a vehicle for backstory. Um, it's okay to maybe like once in a novel have two characters, like maybe your main character who has this mysterious backstory, and maybe their best friend or their love interest, maybe midway in the novel, they finally come clean about their mysterious backstory. That's okay if it happens just one time and it's kind of like a crucial, pivotal point in the book. That's totally fine. In fact, it's interesting. But if we're in the beginning of a book and maybe we're just meeting this main character as readers and we want to know more about her. Is it okay for us to learn about her and everything that's happened in the past by her sitting with a friend and saying something like, so remember last summer when we went to LA and we had such a great time, but then that terrible thing happened and it completely changed my life? And then the friend's like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Also, what happened was A, B, C, and D. Yeah, so why are you asking me this? That is not how a real conversation works. And that will make readers lose interest really quickly because it's very obvious that all the writer is doing is trying to set up a conversation that will allow them to dump a bunch of backstory on the readers. You don't do that. Um, those kind of conversations can work, but only if a backstory isn't fully revealed in the conversation, but it's hinted at. Like, for example, in the example I just used about the two friends who went to LA or whatever, if if the main character says something like, I'm actually thinking about going back to LA again, believe it or not. And then her friend says, are you serious? Even after what happened last year? And then she's like, yeah. And then they leave it at that. That is just enough to whet a reader's appetite to be like, ooh, what happened in LA? It must have been something bad. So that will make them want to keep turning pages and keep reading. But if you just dump everything all at once, especially in the beginning of a book and in a conversation that should be laid back and it turns into just this dramatic monologue, that's too much and it seems fake. That's the point. Dialogue has to be real, and dumping and using it to dump backstory makes it fake. Okay, a second tip is to make sure that every character always, of what not to do, is to make sure that every character always says exactly what they're thinking. Do not do that. Now, if there was one character in the book, or maybe two, because this is their personality, they do tend to have no filter and they just say whatever they're thinking. That's fine, because that's who those one or two people are. But most humans are not like that. Most people say one thing, but they really mean something else. Um, or something that I do a lot because I'm really bad at vocalizing what's in my head. I'll almost say what I mean, but there's like, it just doesn't come out right. It's like kind of like I'm doing right now, not like speaking in full sentences. Um, yeah, to be realistic, you have to portray people the way they actually speak and the way they present themselves to others. Most of the time, we're so worried about saying the wrong thing to people that we try to be a bit more careful and guarded in the way we speak, and that should come across in dialogue, except for those rare characters who do say exactly what they're thinking. And usually the reader's going to be drawn to those rare characters because they stand out. Um, so, yeah, for example, instead of having a character, like let's say that two people are about to get into an argument, but they're not there yet. They're just kind of annoyed with each other. So maybe John is like, I thought we were going to go out tonight, to Mary. And Mary is like, I really hate going out with you right now, because you've been annoying me for a while lately. And I just want to actually stay home and for you not to bother me. And then he just like goes off and it's like, what? That's crazy. Now that's a great way to escalate an argument from here, from nothing to like, oh. But it's not realistic unless Mary is the type of person who literally just says whatever she's thinking and does not think about the consequences. Or if she's really angry and she's so angry, words just tumble out of her mouth. But for most of us, that conversation would not go like that with our significant other. Um, what would make that dialogue more realistic would be if John said something like, hey, maybe he walks into the room and he sees Mary sitting on the couch or whatever, and they were supposed to go out. He's like, hey, I thought we were going to go out tonight. And she's like, oh, she pauses. I'm not really feeling good. And she avoids his eyes. That's she feels fine, but she just doesn't want to go out with him because she's annoyed by him. In fact, she'd rather he not be at the house right now. That's the subtext. So readers crave reality, which means they will crave subtext. So instead of having each character just say exactly what they're thinking, there are other ways to do that, and that moves us to point number 3 of what not to do. We already know that they're not going to say everything they're thinking. The next thing is we don't want every character's gestures and tone and body language to be the same. That is a no-no, because the subtext of what a character is really thinking, which is often different from what they say, that subtext comes out in their very specific gestures and body language. And every character has different tells. One thing that I make a mistake on quite often in my books is that I have people bite their lips or shrug. And I noticed that I do that way too much. Now, it's true that most people, in American culture at least, most people do shrug a lot. We're like, I don't know, that's natural. But there are other things that people do, like trying to think, like this. And this is something some people do. So you can include that while she was thinking, or she looked up to the left and while she was considering how to answer his question, tapped her, whatever you call, pointer finger on her chin. Sure, you can write it better than that though. But like something like that, or maybe some people tug at their ear a little bit when they're uncomfortable. Other people might clasp their hands really tightly together in their lap, and that's how you know they're tense, and maybe they're not being as forthcoming when they're speaking to you. But it all depends on the character's personality. Like if someone is an extrovert, some things that they might do when they're talking is they might lock eyes with someone. Like when they're really invested in a conversation, they might lock eyes with this person and gesture a lot, and maybe smile a lot. An introvert probably have a lower tone. And even if they're saying something super interesting, and maybe they're the type of introvert that has no brain to mouth filter, so they're just saying stuff, but still, the way that they present themselves, as far as body language goes, would probably still be very closed off because of their introverted nature. So they might be calling someone, saying like, "You're the most horrible person I've ever met in my entire life, and I really hate you." But they're not. They're barely moving. They're speaking barely above a whisper, and their body is very calm. So it's important to remember those little quirks about your individual characters and to put that body language into the dialogue. As like after the dialogue tag, where you write she said or he said, after that, help with the reader to see what they look like as they're speaking. And that's how we know what they're really thinking, as opposed to them just blurting out everything they're really thinking, because that's not how real people work. Um, the fourth tip, I kind of already touched on this, but you don't want to give every character the same tone. It's good to remember that everyone is different. The words and voice, type of voice that people use, or type of speaking voice, is dependent on their age, their culture, sometimes their gender, um, and also very dependent on their aim or goal in that particular conversation. Because people will sometimes change based on who they're speaking with. At least most people do, not everyone, but most of us do. Like if, let's say that a character who is very extroverted, um, and knows how to get what they want, is speaking with a superior. They're going to want to try to impress the superior so they can get what they want from him or her. So they might talk with a tone that's almost British. They might start using big words like egregious and innocuous. I don't know. Is that even a word? I don't know. But they might start using big words or gesturing a bit more and lift their chin and talk louder because they're showing off. But that very same person, let's say that they are just with their friends, and they're very relaxed. They're going to be just themselves. They might still be loud because they're an extrovert, but they're going to be more relaxed. So that needs to come across in the tone. Everyone's tone should vary throughout the book. You don't want every single character in your story to overuse the word like. Maybe only one character does that because of their age and where they grew up. Yeah. And some people are going to sound more submissive most of the time, whereas other characters will sound more dominant most of the time because that's their personality. So the main things that this little list of tips seems to really bring out is that every character should be different. Just like in real life, not all people talk the same. You might be in one country, like you might be in America, US, but because there's so many different types of people here, as there are in every country, we don't all talk the same. We all have different subcultures that influence the way that we think and the way that we therefore speak. So it's really important to bring that out in writing. Another thing, number 5, that can be helpful not to do is to have everyone either smile or chuckle to show that they're happy. No. Everyone's different. Some people don't smile very often. Other people smile a lot, and it's okay if one or two characters in your book are super friendly and they do just smile a lot. Maybe they're people pleasers too. It's important to show that. So that's fine if it's that a quality that is unique to those one or maybe two people in your book. But most people are not like that. Most people don't trust so easily, so they may not smile very readily. So Yeah, just it's easy to overuse those smiles and chuckles when writing dialogue. I know I tend to do that a lot. And I just read a book last night where that had that problem. I really enjoyed the book, but the dialogue was a bit of a mess, and part of it was because the author kept having people smile and chuckle in weird situations. It's like the author didn't know what else to do to show that this person wasn't to make us like this character. They wanted us to like the characters so they would have her smile or chuckle, but it was at inappropriate moments in the story. We would have liked her even if she hadn't chuckled. For example, the book was about a woman who was being chased by two serial killers. And finally, she's confronted by one of the serial killers and he almost kills her. But she ends up overtaking him and killing him. But of course, she's very wounded by the end of this. So after she's wounded and bleeding and probably on the doorstep of death, but she has killed the serial killer, another woman who happens to be in the room with her sees that she's flailing. So the woman comes over to try and help her. And as she's helping her, and this is my point, I'm like talking so much just to get to this one point. But as the woman is helping our main character, the main character looks at her and gives her a big smile and it's like, thank you. Or I don't know, she didn't even say thank you, to be honest. That's not accurate. She told her name. She said she gave her a big smile, even though she's bleeding profusely and about to die. She smiled and told her name. That's just so fake. Like, if I had just beat up a serial killer and he nearly killed me, I wouldn't have the energy to smile. I might say thank you. I don't think I would tell them my name. it's just, you have to be realistic about this and think about what's happening in a scene. Because I do think one of the reasons why, like I said, authors tend to rely too much on smiling and chuckling is just because they want readers to like this person and make the main character seem like a cool, friendly person. But there's so many other things you can do. In fact, I think that the action of a main character, like what they do on behalf of others, is a bit more important than little gestures like smiling. In fact, it would be kind of cool if a villain smiled a lot. And yeah, but anyway, let's move along now. The sixth thing that, trying to look at my notes, sorry, I can't read. The sixth point is if a character is being sarcastic, you don't want to explain this in the dialogue tag. That's a big no-no. Now, it's okay maybe to do that once or twice. That's really fine. But if it's a repeated thing, every time a character says something that is sarcastic or that is ironic, don't need to then explain it to the readers. Instead, assume that the readers are going to get it and then move on because it makes it less funny. That same book I was reading last night, it had a lot of these moments where it was actually sort of funny, kind of, where the main character would say something sarcastic because she's pretty sarcastic. But then always, after the dialogue tag, the author would put in, she hoped that her sarcasm would be accepted, or something to let us know she wasn't being, she was being sarcastic. And that was so irritating. It was like, we get it. She has dry humor. We get that. Like, we got that from chapter 1. You don't need to hit us over the head with that every time. Just leave it. That will make it funnier. Yeah. All right. Number 7, the last point. Don't keep characters talking constantly. Yeah, if two characters are in a room alone, it's cool if they're talking. But sometimes it's better if they're not. Silence between two key characters can be an excellent choice. It lets us see how an unspoken exchange between them goes. Like, let us look at their body language. Are they looking at each other? This especially works when there's a love interest involved. Like, if two characters who like each other, but maybe don't know it yet, are on the verge of like maybe getting into a relationship, it's very cool and it ups the tension if they don't speak for a little bit. Like, why aren't they speaking? Is it nervous? And it probably nervousness. It probably is. So it's kind of fun to read about moments of silence when all you see are awkward body language, maybe a touch, maybe someone looks at someone and looks away, and then slowly get into maybe some stilted and very brief dialogue. So yeah, silence can be pretty cool in books. So again, those 7 things that are not great to do in dialogue is to, first of all, use dialogue between characters as a vehicle to give readers backstory. Not a good idea. Secondly, making sure that every character always says exactly what they're thinking. That too is a bad idea. People don't do that. 3, have every character use the same gestures and motions when speaking. Not everybody bites their lip. Not everybody tilts their head. I do it a lot, but not everyone does. 4, give every character the same tone of voice. No. People are different. Some people, everything they say is like a question. Other people just know everything and they're very forthright. So include that in your book. People have different tones. It makes your characters more interesting and realistic. Number 5, everyone either smiles or chuckles to show that they're happy and likable. No, some very likable people look angry a lot. Yeah. One of the nicest people at my job, she does not smile very often. But everyone knows that she's awesome. She just doesn't smile a lot. And that's how real people are. We don't just walk around smiling and chuckling all the time. 6, if a character is being sarcastic, explain this in the dialogue tag. No, don't do that. It's terrible. It takes away from the humor of the moment. 7, keep characters talking constantly. Again, no. Sometimes silence is golden. Sometimes having 2 or 3 even characters in a room being silent, where they're all just looking at each other and we're reading their body language. That's the dialogue. That is very cool. Not like constantly, but a couple of those moments in a novel are really great. Okay, well, I hope that helped. Yeah. And thanks for watching the video. I don't really have anything else today to say. Thanks for watching.